Gents, I just want to pause the episode for a moment to let you know about the Strong Men of Value Academy. You will have heard me refer to it a number of times, and I want to bring more attention to it. So this isn't just a program, it's a life-changing environment and community of men who are focused on personal and professional growth. We're looking at areas of relationships, wealth, and health, things to help you thrive and maximize your life. Imagine having bi-monthly one-on-one coaching sessions with myself, weekly group coaching calls, and an incredible brotherhood of high achievers by your side. Now, we're diving into resilience, leadership, and holistic growth to not just succeed in your career, but to thrive in your health and your relationships. Your journey to greatness, it starts here. So join the movement and you can apply for the Strong Men of Value Academy. You can head to themanthatcanproject.com to find out more.
Again, it was one of those times I had to come home and I was flying through the airport and I saw this 4-hour work week book and I thought, oh, that sounds pretty good, 4 hours to work a week. And look, it's a bit cheesy and it's probably outdated now, but at the time I didn't finish a degree. I didn't, my understanding of business was I admired people that had done well in business, but I hadn't really ever, had any formal training or education around it. And
The Man That Can Project podcast, a podcast empowering career-driven men to live more fulfilling lives. We are here to challenge your beliefs, redefine success, and talk about the important stuff in a relatable way. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. My name's Lachlan Stuart. Let's get into it. Ed O'Donoghue, thanks for joining me, brother.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Mate, I want to start with getting you to finish the sentence. I'm a man that can... ...
I'm a man that can give it everything I've got and I'll see things through.
Love it, mate. So you've had a very exciting life so far from what I've read up and understand, and just from chatting off air from you. Played professional rugby for 10 plus years and lived in multiple countries while doing that. But then you've also created an incredible company with a huge mission, which we'll talk about more shortly, FroPro. But I'd love to just dive back into the early years just so people can have a bit more of an understanding around how we've got here and your drive and some of the lessons that you learned through your professional rugby career.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, I got lucky. Look, I'm pretty tall, in sports. It's funny, I think, I heard a few of your chats previously and, sports and athleticism and stuff like that came easy to me and, learning and sometimes at school, that was not as easy. But I think sometimes one takes from the other. If something comes easy, you sort of lean into that a bit further. And so, yeah, look, I had, got pretty lucky with that side of things. And I went to a school, it was a rugby school, and, played multiple sports. And then, post school, there was a lot of opportunities to continue on a track towards professionalism. And I was given those opportunities as much as I probably nearly wasted a couple of them. And then, so I was in and around, I played Australian schoolboys, rugby union, Australian under-19s, and then got to about 2021. My father was Irish, so I'd always, we were the only family that moved over. He had 14 brothers and sisters, and I knew about my Irish heritage, but I hadn't really had those cousins and things like that growing up. And so I'd always wanted to go back to that side of the world and, sort of meet my aunties and uncles and whatnot. And so, yeah, I sort of got to the end of the line. I wasn't really offered a position to play professionally in Australia around that 2021. And a lot of my teammates and stuff were. And looking back, look, they worked a lot harder than me, so they definitely deserved it. But, yeah, I was lucky enough to be able to get over to the UK. And I played for a great team called the Northampton Saints. And I sort of looked just at the back of the professional squad there. But the coach there was a guy called Wayne Smith, who's pretty well known as one of the best coaches ever. Essentially, he coached the All Blacks. He's actually just been a part of the last couple of World Cup campaigns as well and won a World Cup with them. And he was nice enough. He took me over. And so that was sort of the start of my opportunity. And it was a pretty big sort of culture shock for me because of the amount of professionalism that I went into. And I probably wasn't totally ready for it. But, it certainly taught me a lot. And to have, I was in the squad with All Blacks and Springboks and Wallabies and whatnot, guys. Mark Connors, who's a Queensland Red legend, And, so it was a big eye-opener. I didn't actually play a game for about 7 or 8 months, like an actual professional match. But, yeah, it was a huge opportunity and sort of started my journey.
That's awesome, mate. What was it like, obviously playing Australian schoolboys and 19s? Were you expecting a contract in Australia to come off the back of that?
Sort of, but again, like I said, I certainly wasn't as applied as a lot of my, the other guys my age, and they sort of understood that was the path. I think I was always just happy to be on the team, and again, that's something that probably kept happening for a few years for me. Like I think, and looking back, no regrets because obviously it's all brought me to where I am. But it's certainly something that taught me later in life when it dawned on me that I probably was just, happy to be there sort of thing. And I saw other guys that were like, working for the next level and the next level and the next thing. So I sort of got some learnings later in life. But at the time I was probably, just whatever happened the next year was all I really cared about.
Yeah, nice. That's cool. Do you feel that being in that professional environment was what helped you start wanting to take things a bit more seriously and not just sort of be happy to be on the team and really give it a crack?
Yeah, certainly. I think like everyone's got those sliding doors moments in life, and if I didn't potentially, make that one decision to go overseas, it probably just would have been that. I would have played for my local club here in Brisbane, found a job, and that would have been, the level I'd stayed at, and that would have been fine. But yeah, I was really lucky. And again, it just comes down to having a shot because I think there's a VHS, which is pretty embarrassing in those days. I sent it to a few club coaches and just so happened that, one of the best coaches in the world was the one that sort of gave me a chance. And then, like I said, it wasn't immediate, but it was certainly being there and being around players that I'd seen play for the All Blacks and the Springboks and things like that. It was quite eye-opening, especially in Australia at the time. It wasn't as common to leave Australia at a young age. There's a lot more of it now, and so like it used to be the guys that were over there were really proven veterans. And so it was a good experience. And also, like I said, the core aspect of it at the time was to go sort of see family and people that I'd always known of but never really properly met. Because so I was actually born in England, and we lived in Ireland for a couple of years when I was young, and then. But I was back here in Australia by the time I was sort of 2.5 or something like that. So I'd never really met all that side of my family.
Yeah, that would have been cool. Was it tough leaving, I guess, behind the safety blanket of all your mates and what you knew in Brisbane, though? Was that a big risk for you?
Look, I'd love to say it was, but the reality is, at that time in Australia, that was when everyone was going over to London for their year off and all that sort of thing. So, it wasn't like I was, catching the train to nowhere. I was literally going, living 30, 40 minutes north of London. And then at any one time, I'd have 3 or 4 mates that were travelling through and living in London. I had a house in Northampton with a couple of other rugby guys, and we'd be cycling through my friends like they were backpackers. So, it was pretty comfortable, to be honest. The rugby aspect of it was tough. Like that was a baptism of fire, but the actually, being over there, it's a very simple transition.
No, that's good. You made it at the right time. Before I moved over to France to play rugby, I waited, and all my mates did their gap years, and I was sitting back in Toowoomba and still trying to crack it here. And then when I went over, everyone was back, so I was just isolated in a country where I didn't speak the language, and I was like, "Whoop, here we go," and try and make some friends now. But I definitely learned a lot of lessons from being in that different environment, and then obviously same thing being in that professional environment. You recognize what it takes to really get to that next level. You can't just rely on natural ability or politics to a degree. It's like there's a lot more that comes into play. But going on throughout your career, what was one of the highlights that you had throughout your career before we'll sort of transition out to business and what comes next? Yeah,
absolutely. So look, I'm probably, as a professional, I was very happy. I got some great experiences. I was pretty much the definition of a journeyman. Like I played a year and a half in Northampton, and then I went and played a year in Worcester, which is another Premier League team. And then my end goal had always been to play one game for Queensland. That was sort of like my thing growing up. I always wanted to play for Queensland. And so I was just fortunate the coach that was going back to coach Queensland was a guy called Eddie Jones, who's everyone would know right now. And and anyway, and he was coaching Saracens, which is another Premier League team. And I basically just front-footed him and said I'd really like to play for Queensland. Take me with you, sort of thing. And he got in touch, and so I was able to go back and play for Queensland, which was sort of like a big thing for me. And so I went home, played for 2 years at the Reds. And then that was probably one of my proud moments of getting a cap there in front of my friends, playing at Suncorp Stadium and all that sort of thing. And then I went back over to Ireland, finally to Ulster, which is in the north, and that was an extraordinary experience because, they was only 2008, so I think, they only put sort of like 8 or 9 years out of what they call the Troubles, like the really hard the Troubles. I think look it up if you really want to know more, and obviously the hard times. But it was just a fantastic place. My dad was from the far south of Ireland. He'd never even been to Belfast. It's about 3 hours from there. Like, it's not even that far. And a lot of my cousins said the same thing. But extraordinarily nice people, fantastic fans. Like, it was really home away from home, and I've missed it ever since. It was excellent. And then, I actually, again, this might go back into business and life a little bit, but I then sort of finished rugby essentially about 29. And then so I just made a decision to move home, and I had basically a list in my iPhone of notes of businesses that I'd like to start. But anyway, one thing led to another, and the Reds had a new coach and they had success. They'd won the 2011 Super Rugby, and the coach there at the time had offered me to come down and just basically train on no contract. And one thing led to another, and I played another 3 years of contracted rugby, which was probably the highlight of my life. It was the ones that I didn't know that I was going to get meant the most. And so, that was, it sort of intertwines with how FroPro started. But, certainly that was probably another highlight of mine. And I got to play my 50th game for Queensland, it meant the world to me. I got the little cap, which is fantastic. And, so there's a few little things in there, but playing for Queensland was a big part of it.
It's awesome. Well, was your outlook any different on rugby? As you just said, you enjoyed those games the most, the ones that you weren't expecting to get that next 3 contracted years. Had how you viewed the game or what you wanted to get out of it shifted?
Absolutely. So there's a big pivotal moment in my life in general. But because I was in Ireland and my father gotten ill, and so I was obviously things in life sort of come up about what's important. So that's when I actually decided to come home and finish rugby, I suppose. But Dad passed away, unfortunately. But then I was obviously wanted to stay at home with my family, and so obviously I think in life things like that just sort of big things to cross about how you contemplate them. And so, certainly I sort of took myself and where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do a bit more seriously. I think I'd been living that year-to-year life of rugby, which is very common. But I was single, I didn't have children, all that sort of stuff. And so in general, the way I would have approached rugby at that time, if I had a rugby team or a contract, would have been different to how I would have previously. But then just so happens, because it was actually one of my ex-teammates, a guy called Clinton Shifkowski, is a great rugby league player, and he transitioned into being an agent. He basically said, it's a shame that you don't keep playing, you're still young. And he was the one that sort of organised this thing with the Reds at that time. And so, to be honest, I took rugby a lot more seriously that time because it was a second chance at doing it better. And also I'd sort of started FroPro as this concept. It wasn't really even in any real IGAs or local independent stores or anything yet. But I just had, a little bit more structure and ambition to my life at that time. And so it actually just helped that then when I went back to rugby, I had a different focus, different lens on it. Big things like that in life sort of give you a bit more perspective about taking things for granted and whatnot. And then, and at 29 as well, it's funny, I look back at 29 now and think how young you were, but you're still at the other end of rugby career and you've got to try a little bit harder than the 22-year-olds and the 20-year-olds. So, it certainly made me, take care physically a bit more and, have more ambition.
You definitely, when you said it's like you're 29, I wish I could go back to being 29.
Yeah, I know.
At the time, I remember being 18 and I'm like, I'm so old, I got it all put together, it's sorted. Then you look at 30-year-olds, you're like, man, they're old. And now it's like everyone's young.
No,
if we look after ourselves, we'll be good. But so you had started, and I'd love to know how you managed playing professional rugby and then also having FroPro on the side, but also going as well. You had big ambitions with that. Was FroPro was one of those lists on your iPhone, just ideas that you wanted to put into fruition?
Yeah, basically. And, look, I'm not an avid reader of books, but it was one of those times I had to come home and I was flying through the airport and I saw this 4-hour work week book and I thought, oh, that sounds pretty good, 4 hours to work a week. And look, it's a bit cheesy and it's probably outdated now, but at the time I didn't finish a degree. I didn't, my understanding of business was I admired people that had done well in business, but I hadn't really ever, had any formal training or education around it. And the main thing that this book did, like I said, it's a little bit of a cheesy book about how to outsource work and, things aren't as hard to achieve. And it did just give me the idea, okay, it's like, oh, maybe it's not that hard. And it sort of gave me a night, like, I broke down my naivety a little bit, but then also put me just far enough in that now I was like, oh, shit, I've started. I better keep going. And so it sort of tricked me into starting because I probably wouldn't have otherwise. And, so I think just getting going was a big thing. And then learning, again, I think I've heard you say this, but, traditional learning wasn't my thing, but funnily learning on the go really was. And when there was something on the line, because I'd made a little bit of money from playing 10 years of rugby. And once I started seeing those savings diminish from putting into a business, like, shit, this is real. You get up that little bit earlier, you don't go meet your mates for beers that night or whatever it may be, because, there's stuff, you've got to take care of business. So, and then going back into, look, it started and, that was the one that won for me because it was the one that had the most ability to be run. Products sell at night. They sell in Western Australia and South Australia when you're in Queensland, as opposed to, like location businesses and whatnot. So that's what attracted me to it. Also, look, I love the product at the time was ice cream. So better for you, higher protein,
so good, man.
No sugar ice cream. Yeah, and I loved it. And it was basically the first one of its kind in Australia that I could see. And now we love our products. That's what, we're a product-focused business. So I went into rugby and when rugby came out of nowhere. And so, mate, there were times where I'd just turn off the business for a month. I just wouldn't sell anything. It didn't really – and it was sort of – just because I was like, well, I can't commit to taking care of that customer, so we wouldn't start. And we were only doing independent supermarkets and IGAs and things like that. And while I got told from the very start that's the way you're meant to do it, I look back now and I think it's totally incorrect. I think you've got to go big or go home. But, it's different for different people. I mean, my goal wasn't to, be selling at markets and things like that. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that whatsoever, but that just wasn't my goal. And so, funnily, sometimes we'd have a trip to South Africa and I'd have to get up at, 2 a.m. to sort of, and again, it wasn't great for the rugby for that weekend. I was trying to be quiet from my roommate. You'd have to do a few hours emails at 2 to 4 or 2 to 4:30 just to make sure that obviously that anybody that was, and also I used to do the orders myself, funnily, which I look back and just so embarrassed about because there's so many easier ways to do it. But, that's the way it happened. And like I said, I think you learn as you're going. And if you're not learning, you should probably get out.
Oh, yeah. Man, I love that. That's such a inspiring story the whole time. I'm like, firstly, it's like so many people get stuck in this analysis by paralysis because they think they have to have a degree. And once again, you want to have a doctor who has a degree, but there's many things in business that you can just pick up and fucking run with.
Absolutely. And that's maybe look, if you're a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, degrees is perfect. But I'm not saying degrees are bad whatsoever, but it also doesn't preclude you from, especially in business, of having a go, especially if you have the aptitude to learn. Like so many great people that I've been able to take advice from, they're not, tertiary qualified. So.
Yeah, 100%. And then another thing you said, which made once again, I understand and appreciate a lot, is having a compelling vision. You said you weren't just wanting to go sell at markets, like you wanted to go big, or there's no point doing it. And I think all of us get up every single day anyway. You may as well have something that makes you go, ooh, let's jump out of bed and get to work, because you're on the road, dude, which is mind-boggling that you're doing this and you're getting up earlier before games to do emails. That a lot of people never hear that stuff or wouldn't even do that stuff because it's like, no, I got to be perfect, but you wanted it to work, which is
yeah, absolutely. And I also look, like I said earlier, I didn't want to miss this opportunity, the second bite at rugby, which was, it was the funnest 3 years of my rugby career probably. But yeah, I didn't want to miss that. I didn't want to spoil it, but also look, I was, like I said, I was going, once you're going, you can't stop. And, so yeah, the little things like that. But again, there's it was fairly isolated, just 2 weeks a year in South Africa. But you got to do those things. And the funny thing is, well, like, even, again, I'm just normal, like from Brisbane, so this is my city, and it was fun going between trainings and going to IGAs to try and sell the product, like face to face. That is something that I enjoyed about doing the small side of things. But yeah, once rugby finished, I sort of, it was my first year. I'm like, okay, look, I'm going to give this a red hot crack as a standalone. And I got a fluke this meeting at Woolworths, but and I went down to Sydney and straight off the bat, you get 300 stores, and I think I'd never had more than 100 stores at once, and so one person made one decision, and you get a third of their supermarkets, and it just changes your perspective on how to do things. But again, that was 2016, so it's there wasn't as much information, I think, in FMCG is fast moving consumer goods. Just so I don't do the lingo. And so that's pretty much anything that sells in supermarkets or servos or petrol and convenience stores and things like that. And there's a lot more information, a lot more opportunity for people now to do that sort of style of selling, where you can go, as long as you've got a support network of supply, marketing, you can achieve like bigger ranges of stores very quickly.
What was it like? I want to go into like the scale of 300 stores from 100 and stuff like that, but just quickly, I'd love to know more about what it was like from you pivoting from being an athlete into businessman. Obviously, as you've mentioned, you had this journeyman experience, and you had your business sort of going before you even retired. Was it a tough transition to hang up the boots?
No, I was, because look, I was really lucky, but in fairness, I started a little bit at the Reds, but it was mostly when there was one of the two guys. We had two excellent Wallaby second rowers that I played with, and if one of them wasn't ready to go, I'd step in. But I was again lucky to play a lot of great games. We got to play the Lions, which was an awesome experience at home. And but yeah, I was pretty much ready. And also, look, I didn't want to go overseas again. There wasn't really much need for me at the Reds again that next year. And like I said, I thought it was going to be a few games at max and probably just train that year in 2013. And then I got 3 years, fully paid. And that was a really great experience. Like I said, it was guys that when I left in 2008 were kids. And then now these guys were the best in the world. It was really fulfilling to see them, their career come full circle. And they were super champions and whatnot. But so I was pretty ready, but also I was nearly excited because I was like, look, what if I can do this while I'm playing? Imagine what I can do if I'm not. And that's the side of things. And I'm like, it can't be even like being a rugby player in general, and you'd know this, that it's not forever. You know that. So, you can't, there's always these pockets of life where you go, gee, I'd love it to stay just like this, but it's never going to. And so it was really exciting. I was like, this is going to be more than this, the idea that FroPro could be, a business that could, provide, a life for me, because I know rugby can only do that for so long. So I was pretty pumped about it. I feel if anybody in sport, I hear some sports people like, oh, I don't know what to do. Like, it's not a cliff. Like, you can see it coming for a long time.
I think in a way, being an athlete and having that or coming to the end of the road is a good thing in a way. Like if you can transition well, or even just get through that transition period, you start to, as you've just said, Ed, recognize that some things in life aren't forever. And, whether it's you have your children growing up or have an opportunity at a job, so you can really focus on making the most of it while you've got it. And one thing that I look at is, I have a couple of mentors and stuff like that, and some of them are like, we could triple your business and everything like that. I'm like, I know, but it would require this sacrifice. And at the moment, I'm married, I'm living abroad, and I understand physically there's going to be things that I won't be able to do when I'm 45, 50 that I can do now that I'd love to give a bit more time
Absolutely.
to. So while I'm sacrificing there, I'm gaining there. And I don't think I would have had that, been able to look at life that way had I not finished rugby. I think
absolutely.
I would have just taken
it's very comfortable.
Granted.
You get to go to work with 30 mates a day. It's reasonable money, and you get to travel a bit. It's very comfortable. And it's a great lifestyle. It's not something to be take for granted, but certainly I think sports people in general, especially in Australia, are much more armed now with the idea that it will finish, and also that they're professional and personal development being readying themselves for the end of their sporting careers. They're much more prepared now, I believe, broadly. So, no, mate. Look, like I said, I was ready, and it was exciting actually. But I mean, I must admit, it's a sort of probably a bit of a privilege that I had something ready to go to. So I didn't have. Yep. I think a lot of sports people, because they compete, you want something like that's the great thing about business is you get to compete all the time. You get to prepare and try and you win, you have losses, but it's a really. I think sports people have a real good advantage, and anybody who trains and gives themselves goals and whatnot has a very good opportunity to do well in business.
I agree. There's definitely a lot of skills that translate, especially team sports, that's for sure. With your first year out of rugby, so then I guess the first official year of you being full-time in the business, did you find it was a bit shaky because you didn't have the structure of rugby there as well? Like you were sort of in control of your time there?
Absolutely, because you get told where to be, when to be, and it's really nice actually, because you don't have to make your own schedule. It's something I wasn't great with. I could break out a couple of good hours of work, but because I had 2 hours to get work done, outside around rugby, whereas when you've got 8 or 9 hours in a day, I was sometimes, you could like the typical writer's block, you'd have an email open for 2 hours, and the amount of other shit that I would have done to keep myself away from the keyboard. But like I said, it did come down to learning on the go. And then I think instinct, learning, I tell you, one of the big things is I should really get in touch, me saying to myself, I should get in touch with that person before this thing becomes an issue, whatever it may be. And I put it off and put it off and put it off. And then that person would get in touch with me, and you lose that goodwill that you reached out to them. And took me a long time to get good at that, because you think you're going to give someone the wrong answer or something, but I think again, just front footing stuff and seeing the ball coming, I think was a big thing for me. And so I used to do all that. And again, just some of the as you probably read every business blog or whatever it is that you can get your hands on to take other people's perspectives. And there's this one about eating the frog. So the Monday morning, all the shit items that you really didn't want to do, it's people afraid of public speaking, and I have been one of those. But sending the shit email was something I hated, and I was like, oh, that's it. But once I got my, that was one of the things that post rugby was really, got me to become more confident in business. And it took years, because I look back now how I was writing some of those emails like novels, and they were 2-3 line emails like they should have been. And so it's just time on the job, and it the first year was certainly difficult because I was still very, very much thought I was fake, like a phony, in the area. Like I'm still a rugby player trying to be a business person, but I think largely people are human and they respect the fact that you're trying.
100%. How do you shift your identity there? That's a massive one. I've obviously been fortunate, similar to you, we played sport, but I've also interviewed over 500 people from millionaires, billionaires, athletes, all these sorts of things. And one thing that I've really taken away from every conversation I've had is they've decided who they wanted to be, and then they've built the identity to become that individual. So for yourself, you said then, you felt like a bit of a phony, and I think a lot of people experience that imposter syndrome in their life. And but how did you shift identity from going, okay, I'm a businessman, to now I'm a football player, to now I'm a businessman?
Yeah, look, I hope I'd get backed up here by friends and family or whatnot. And again, look, never thought of myself as like, obviously it wasn't a international world rugby star or something like that. And so I hope I didn't impose, the idea that I was a footballer on people. Like, again, that's natural for some people because they are so well known. And so even especially, I thought it potentially may have been a drawback going into some offices and some, going into headquarters of supermarkets, assuming that, the product would sell because I was a footballer. And, if you're not a footballer of a great note, that's not going to be the best marketing tool for you. So I nearly tried to pull that back a little bit and make it all about the product and the opportunity and, the first mover advantage and things like that. And so it was fairly easy for me. And, it'd only be the occasional, a couple of people at Coles. There's a lot of English people that come over from the supermarket scene and they're at Coles and they like rugby. And then the next minute you got a really good conversation, because I played over there. But so hopefully I did try very hard to make that it wasn't my sort of thing. I wasn't trying to push that as the unique selling point. Other people, if you're, Steve Smith or someone like cricketing, you'd be like, oh, that is the core, people will buy it because that guy owns it. So I certainly didn't think I had any profile that would sell. So I tried to make that a second point.
Yeah, it's interesting with the identity stuff and what I sort of try to. It's how I talk to myself, but I hope that people similar to you. It's not because I think I'm great at any one thing, but for me, I'm like I still believe I'm an athlete because athletes are generally the healthiest and fittest people that I know in a specific thing. So if I tell myself I'm an athlete, I'm going to think more like an athlete would. How am I going to sleep? What would I eat in order to get the results? Same with business and as a husband as well. It's like, okay, well, what's that idea or who do I need to be as a husband to be that best version, or who do I need to be as a leader or a founder or a CEO to do it well? And sometimes that makes things uncomfortable because you have to learn new skills. You have to be assertive. You have to, wear a few different hats.
To be honest, though, to have that athlete mentality it's very few negatives as far as what you've just mentioned about learning new skills, even because you have to be coachable, working hard because that's something that has to be done to win. So there's very few things. I think if you as you've mentioned, you've interviewed a lot of high performers, and anything that I've read or enjoyed reading it nearly feels that people that potentially weren't athletic but have been successful in business have nearly retrofitted their mindset to being in that athlete's mindset of winning and training and learning, all the time. What can they do that will make them better? Certainly, like I said, I'm not anywhere near that, but I certainly admire people that are.
Definitely. And so for FroPro, you said you started with ice cream, which I was telling you before we started. Myself and Brad, my mate at Functional, one day I don't know why I think we did it for a YouTube video. We just smashed a few tubs of the ice cream and then did a session. Didn't obviously end up very well, but it was still delicious to see you could eat the ice cream.
Not the best idea. Yeah.
I won, and it's amazing. It's an amazing product. But now you've branched out, and I can see on your shirt you got pizzas, burritos. You got a heap of different products there. So what's the vision for you, and how do you select which products are coming next, and why are they so important for you to continue? This is a multi-layered question. Sorry.
I don't know. Why do you keep for it? Yeah. So look,
adding,
initially, I made the ice cream was the first thing that came to mind. Again, I was sort of when I played, I was sort of not extremely disciplined. I'd sort of yo-yo really badly, especially with weight. Coach say not heavy enough, and then I'd eat crap to get heavier, and then I'd be fat, and then they'd be like, your skin folds are too high. And so I was just always trying to chase my tail. And look, that was just me, especially when I was that younger period of my time in rugby. And so I tried to get better at how I could sort of I just love food. And I mean, I know everyone does, but, I just enjoy so much, especially, sort of, your comfort foods. And so, ice cream was one that I felt had some space to be, bettered. Everything that I'd seen was very sort of artificial and whatnot. And so, that was the first thing we tried to crack on with. And, so I had a really good first product because actually back then we had to try to even convince manufacturers to make it for you. You had to try and make it yourself somehow. So I'd buy like a small, it's called a Cuisinart ice cream machine, and make a litre at a time. And I got pretty close with a few things. Just Googled what makes ice, what's the structure of ice cream and like how do you
is that how you started it?
Yeah, because that's got a lot of weird like health food stores to buy like guar gum and xanthan gum and all these gums that sort of thicken and emulsify ice cream and whatnot. And so I got pretty close and convinced a couple of guys to make some larger runs of it, and then so we got like a viable product that I could sell. And so look, the stupid parts of it, because it sounded so great, like healthy, protein ice cream, like what could be wrong? But as you know, in Queensland, we have like 40-degree summers, and transporting ice cream in summer is fucking crap. So we lost a lot of stuff. It was always melting, especially because we're doing small deliveries and all that sort of stuff. But essentially, the idea of the product was to create permissible indulgence so that you could have something that you enjoy and have a better relationship with food, so that you're not absolutely pigging out and then absolutely feeling shit. And again, look, there's, even as you mentioned before we jumped on, there's just a great environment now. I think social media has got its good and bad things, but there's a sensational amount of Australian advocates for having a better relationship with food through, making small different changes. And so everything we make sort of tries to fall into being permissible indulgence, and ideally around nutritious comfort foods. So things that were previously, you would see as being, not great for you. And then obviously just being able to introduce that into your diet a little bit more often so that you don't feel those, frustrations with eating well. And so even just what eating well means to you, it just becomes a little bit closer to what eating, having fun and having fun food means.
Yeah.
And so it's like there's a saying in sport and in football about your best game being closer to your worst game, and so like if your best week and your worst week are really close, I think you've got a better opportunity of succeeding long term about how you feel about yourself, and just your self confidence. Because if you've got that, again, everyone's going to have that bad week, but everyone is going to go see the Colonel every now and again.
Yeah.
You don't, if it's all the time, that's when you're frustrated. You're going to be upset with yourself. And so, to that point, ice cream was our entire business until about 2.5 years ago. And I'd always had this vision of a healthy pizza that we could buy. And so I worked on that for a couple of years, and I actually got rejected a couple of times by buyers. They're like, look, we love the idea, but it tastes crap, and then keep working on it. And so then we got it right, and then they took it, and it's been phenomenal for us. So that's the backbone of our business now. And so then that allowed us to pitch these better-for-you frozen burritos that are high in protein. We use I say quinoa because I'm bogan, but quinoa. And so it's really very healthy, high protein, sort of just small changes. And they've been a huge success for us. And then this just a couple of months ago, start of October, we launched a healthy fried chicken. So that's FPFC, FroPro fried chicken. And that's been awesome. So we've launched four lines of that, and we just used just replace some better for you ingredients into the batter. And we use whole breast chunk and things like that, and whole breast fillets. And again, it's just 3 pillars. We've got time, money, and health. So health obviously has already been covered, but time and money. A lot of people like yourself, you're busy and you want to come home, and making a breading station with chicken and egg and batter and all these sorts of things is a little bit time consuming and wasteful of ingredients. So that's we try to make a solution, with the product. So that's the spiel, mate. I don't want to sell you on the spot.
Oh, dude, you've already sold.
We love it. It made it so fun, and mate, every time if I see someone buying it, it brings me so much joy. And like even now, sometimes like it used to be if I'd seen one complaint, it'd ruin me for a week. But now it's like if I get that, you see that one compliment, or someone's happy, or they've said this greatest thing. Sadly, actually, we moved on from ice cream about 2 months ago as well. So it just got really tricky in Australia to manufacture at a good price, and we didn't want to stretch our consumer because it's, as you know, the cost of living's tough at the moment. And so we pulled out of that for a little while. And to be honest, I was, as much as it was, they were complaints about us leaving ice cream, it was sort of a nice thing because they're like, oh, what am I going to do now? And, so it just showed like we'd given like a nice product and a good solution.
Yeah.
So, we just want to keep making really nice, good, fun, tasty, delicious, nutritious products. And that's sort of the core of the business.
There was one thing that I'm super excited to get back to Oz in March and give the burritos a go. We're literally in the freezer. I live on these ones, and they're not amazing, but you touched on time, money, and obviously health with the options. And once again, super busy. So you're looking for those quick options, and I love breakfast burritos. Like, they're just my favorite thing of all
America's
time.
the king of burritos. I was shocked. So in Australia, we actually only had one brand of burrito. It was a vegetarian burrito that comes from California. But we didn't actually have any other just burrito, like good, bad, ugly burritos, just none. And I was like, because I love visiting America, and I love American food. I love walking the supermarkets there. And they've got about 3 doors of frozen burritos at least in every supermarket over there. And to your point, breakfast burritos are the king. But finally, Australians are a little bit different. We have a sausage and egg burrito. It's probably our slowest seller. I think in Australia we love, what you just have the same breakfast every day. But I feel Americans in America, they indulge a little bit more.
Oh, definitely. It's not good for you, but the convenience and a thing that a lot of people don't consider is that triangle that you touched on. So I wouldn't have even thought to bring that up, but I'm glad you did with the getting the 3 corners of the triangle. You can't have everything, so you got to find this perfect compromise or balance between them that's going to allow you to get the outcomes that you want. And for most of us, once again, we're not professional athletes, so I don't want to be on this super restricted diet where I'm eating kale all the time and that's it, and it's not very enjoyable. I understand how we all do. Life goes so bloody quick. You want to enjoy the meals that you're having, but you also don't want to let it blow out too much that you look back and go, fuck, how to put on this extra 20 kilos.
And it's actually quite liberating because and again, like I said, I'm a binge eater from way back. But it's just when you can think, oh shit, I actually haven't been here for ages. When you do turn up at Macca's or KFC. But travel days are the hardest. We, because we're in Brisbane, we go to Sydney and Melbourne for meetings quite often. And travel days are really tough. And I'm never like, if you make a small mistake, that's fine, but it's just get back to it the next day.
Yeah. I'm definitely when I get back, I'm gonna eat through all your new products, which will be great. But what's the goal for you over the next couple of years? Where do you want to take FroPro?
Look, like I said, we're pleased, and I think we work very, very hard. Like it was just me for a long time. I think until it's probably about 2 years ago, I was sole trader or whatever, I suppose. And then we contracted out, but now we've got a small team and they're excellent, and they're like, we all love coming to work and hanging out and doing, having a good group meeting. Everyone, even if it's not someone's area of expertise, everyone understands the products so well that we all get, talk to each other's parts of the business. And so one thing we really pride ourselves on is understanding and communicating to our community and our consumers, because like we want to please them. We want to make sure that we, like even previously in ice cream, we'd actually design products specifically through request. So like as far as marketing goes, not a marketing genius by any measure, but I'd certainly like to listen to people, because if they tell you and you're pretty sure they're telling you the truth, it'll sell. So one of the big things is we just want to continue to make stuff that people are asking for, or that we feel would be benefit to them. So to grow, and even if we can just see areas of the supermarket that are under innovated. So like, for instance, we do everything currently in the freezer because freezer just got ignored for a long time, and they got a lot of big players, like a lot of multinationals that have just been there for 20 years, like in 25 years. Like Frozen Pizzas haven't really had a new pizza for quite some time. And so anywhere that we can make something, so actually a really nice fact is we had like something like 80% of the growth in frozen pizza last year came from just us, because people just didn't go there. In people that train, your 20 to 40 year olds probably didn't go there, and so it was just that the new customer went there. And so anywhere we can do that and make things a little bit easier, quicker for you at home is sort of what we want to do. It's not about global domination or anything like that. We're just like nice growth and keeping the consumers happy.
And I've taken away so much from this, like just even the way that when you were researching your recipes and getting rejected with some of them, you just kept like finding a way to get it done. Like that perseverance, once again, I think comes from being an athlete, but a lot of people, for those who are listening to this and maybe you're not quite getting to where you want to get to, like there's so many things that Ed said that if you were to just break them down and go, okay, what's the framework behind what he's done here? It's what most other successful people do. And there's nothing sexy about it, or, there's no fast tracking doing it. It's just consistently showing up. And as you said at the beginning, it's like you just had a reason to do it and you just didn't stop, didn't stop trying. One last, or actually I want to ask two last questions. The other one was, how did you deal with that rejection when people were saying your product wasn't where it needed to be?
It was good because essentially it was this isn't good, but, so there was always, I think if you can keep dialogue, like that's, I hope, probably something I'm reasonably good at is if you can get dialogue to start with, because some of these people don't want to be found like buyers and, companies, they get approached a lot. But if you can get in and obviously offer value, so I think, and that's everything, I think that's a life and definitely a sport lesson is, no coach is not going to pick you if you offer them something that's going to help them win. So if I look at the buyers that we deal with as sort of that, the coach essentially, and if they say, look, work on this, take it on, because they're not doing it to be pricks to you. They're doing it because it'll genuinely please fix their problem or solve their issue. And then if you can go back and work on it and come back to them. So I think a couple of times we've had that. And then the second time round, if you can literally address someone's problem that they've got with it, or, a consumer tells you or something, I think you're in a pretty good place. So I don't see it as a like spiteful thing, see it as like, hey, that I can fix that if I do that exact thing. And I think sometimes, like, even if you don't agree with it, you can bring it somewhere closer to what they want. I think there's always an opportunity in rejection.
Yeah, nice. And how do you manage, I guess, family and your like hobbies outside of work with work? Because that's a big challenge that a lot of men struggle with.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I got pretty lucky. I mean, not lucky, but just I had children later in life. So, look, I was 38 or 37 or 38 when we had our girl, Olivia, and so it made it a little bit better. But, I mean, for the first 2 years, I was still really on rocky ground with FroPro. Like 1 month could make me absolutely shit myself and go home really anxious for like a month. But then we just started getting the pizzas are coming out and all this sort of thing. So it made things better. But again, later in life, children, I imagine, there's the pros and cons. But certainly I felt better. And, it was also around the time when we, were able to start hiring some staff. And we had, so our boy's 18 months old. I'm probably just a bit more confident and all that sort of thing. So I love it. It was an opportunity then as well that we were sort of a time when I had, I can do daycare drop-offs and I can, do pickups and things like that because we have staff. And so I'm lucky in that regard. Also, my wife's, after we had our daughter and she'd finished maternity leave, we decided she shouldn't go back and work for someone. She should make her own business. So she's a property manager in Brisbane, and so she's made her own agency, and she just won Queensland's #1 property manager at the Real Estate Awards.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm extremely, extremely proud of her. And so Brooke Willis Property is the name of her agency. And so we're both workers. We're working, and I think it's just about compromise. As everyone knows, like you do this one, I'll do that one. And I think as well, it's about designing your. Again, it's easier for me to say because I'm older and I had a lot more time under my belt. But I think it's about designing the opportunity that if you work hard, mate. I had a coach. I really didn't like him, and I realised later that it was probably because I was the dickhead, not that he was. And he used to. I remember making like a cover tackle or something. He's like, and he had a go at me about it. He's like, you should have worked harder earlier. And it was like not enough that I worked hard when it was absolutely needed. And so I feel that, sort of you get the fruits of your labour if you put it in when it's not really needed. Like I think, and then later you get all, like it's like, delayed gratification of training and anything like that. you're getting it now because all the stuff you did earlier. So hopefully, yeah, to you, a long-winded answer is, yeah, it's good life. It's a good life-work balance with family.
Oh man, I love that delayed gratification piece. Like, so many people, and it goes back to what you were saying, I guess, when you were playing footy, you just sort of lived season to season. And once again, I think the lesson I took when I finished rugby and you don't have money coming in and all of that sort of stuff, you recognize that shit, I want to be present in this moment, but I also need to plan for, 10 years down the track, what does that look like? And I think a lot of people, maybe potentially why a lot of men experience midlife crises, because they wake up one day and they haven't thought more about what they want their life to look like since they were 18 and they started, whether it's sport or their university degree. So I think it's important to make sure that what you're doing now is going to allow you those luxuries. I started this business in 2014 with the intent to be able to have a flexible work life, and it's nearly 10 years later to be able to.
It can't happen straight away. That's the I don't know, unless you're really lucky. I think there has to be a period where it's not going to be the easy. There's going to be a bit of hard stuff, and then. But I mean, and again, it's not to to be living in Bali or whatever that the plans are. But it's like literally just to have your time, even if it's that hour in the morning, an hour in the evening, to be able to get the kids or do whatever. But there's definitely the hard times. Allow the good times.
Oh yeah. And where can people buy the product from? You've mentioned a couple of times, but just for everyone listening who's
absolutely. So all the products are in. There's some are in Coles, some are in Woolies, but if the freezer of Woolworths and Coles, and so Coles have pizzas, burritos, and fried chicken, and Woolworths have pizzas and extensive range of burritos, and hopefully we'll be increasing that soon.
Oh, yum, delicious. It's coming on. And one final one, what's your thoughts on Australian rugby at the moment? What do we need to do?
Mate, I could get paid a lot of money if I knew the answer to that. I don't know. Look, it's hard because sometimes it's like I was sort of pick and stick. And so like I know Eddie and the previous CEO I went to very unusually. I went to a rugby lunch the other day, and one of the people was the chairman of the QRU, and he said one of the big things that was not respected by the rugby public was the lack of humility, and I probably agree with that. However, I sometimes think that you need to give people time in a role to work it out. But I think the guy that's just taken over, Dan Herbert's one of Australia's best ever players, and he's also like a tremendous bloke I've had a couple of dealings with. So I think it's in good hands. If they get a really good coach, I don't think it's a problem. We've got the best, I hate to say this because I've got a few New Zealand staff, but we've got one of the best rugby nurseries in the world in Australia, in Queensland and New South Wales. And it's just getting better and better. So we're never going to be short of having stock. It's just about, working out how we can keep them and nurture them. So I always have a positive view, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. It's exciting. But Ed, thanks for coming on. And for those who wanted to get some product, you can check out obviously in the link, but also follow them on social media as well. But mate, it's good to get to learn more behind the business, because obviously when you see a business from a shop front, it's we were talking about this before, getting to hear the founders' journeys and put a sort of a name to the face and to the brand makes me love a brand a lot more.
Yeah, awesome. Lockie, thank you so much for your time, mate. Congrats on your service. It's extraordinary. And look forward to catching up with you when you're in Brisbane.
Thank you for listening to the Man That Can Project podcast. My name is Lachlan Stuart, and I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful. If you did, please take a moment to rate and review the Man That Can Project on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with our newest episodes. We'll see you again next time.